Hello, გამარჯობა.
გამარჯობა ყველას.
გამარჯობა. მოგესალმებით.
გამარჯობა ყველას.
გამარჯობა. მოგესალმებით.
გამარჯობათ.
გამარჯობა, მოგესალმებით.
Right, hello everyone. Welcome to the event. I wonder if we can make it so we can only see the speakers in the top section. Deanna, if that's possible. If that's not possible, it's fine. I think we'll wait another couple of minutes to kind of give everyone a chance to arrive. I think we're still waiting for one of the speakers, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe give it a couple more minutes, then we'll start the event. So first of all, I should probably confirm, can everyone hear me? Can someone just confirm that I'm audible?
Yes, we hear you well.
Great. Okay, I think I can see Vano and Natalie's here. Is Mariam Laskhi here? I can see her. She's in the call, but I don't know if she's physically present. Just to give you a heads up, Mariam Laskhi said that she's just coming to the end of her series of votes in Parliament, so she may be slightly late. So, hence I asked the question. But if not, then we'll start in a couple of minutes, and she can join us once we're up and running. Yeah, actually, one more thing. Deanna has very kindly reminded me to say that this whole event has been live streamed on YouTube, so you will be able to view this event hopefully also afterwards. So just the link will probably be provided by Deanna at some point. So just to let you know on that front. Okay, I think we should probably make a start, and if Mariam's not around, then I think we should start, and then when she can join us, she can join us. So yeah, first to give an introduction to this meeting, to this event. This event's been organised by the Eurasia Democratic Security Network, which is a network of up-and-coming academics, policymakers, officials, and generally interested people in the region, dedicated to the idea of democratic security, the interplay between democratization and greater security for the region. So, it's been running for a few years now, and we've basically got this network of people built up over many years, of people who have been through the fellowship program and just starting up.
Alex, you are muted. You are muted, yes.
Oh, sorry, I have to do that all over again then. I'm sorry. I was just introducing the meeting. I'm just saying we're going to start now. And when Mariam Laskhi is available, then she can join us. I was going to give you a short introduction to the event and to the organisation. This event's been organised by the Eurasia Democratic Security Network, EDSN. I'm Alex Scrivener. I'm the Programme Manager of EDSN. Also organising this with me is Diana, also with ESN, the Centre for Social Sciences in Tbilisi, of which EDSN is part. EDSN is a network. It runs a fellowship for leading minds in the sector throughout the region, be it from academia, from policy making, from officialdom, or the NGO sector, or wherever, you know. So we have a fellowship which has, you know, led to basically we have a network of these people and events which has been going on for the last few years. And we are putting on a series of events, which is the first on the EU integration of Georgia and Georgia's crossroads at which we now stand. I don't think I need to, since you're all at this meeting, I don't need to probably go into much detail about what the situation is vis-a-vis Georgia in the EU candidate status question. Obviously, you know, the unprecedented situation going on in Ukraine, Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova took advantage of this historic moment to make a real push for EU membership or EU candidate status. That status was obviously accepted and granted for Ukraine and Moldova, and somewhat unexpectedly, and either deservedly or not, depending on your stance, Georgia was denied candidate status and instead was given a set of conditionalities to fulfill in order to gain the same status as Ukraine and Moldova. This has been a subject of obviously great debate in Georgia and beyond in the whole region. And this discussion is to go beyond, I suppose, the endless debates about sort of what happened and why it happened, and to sort of look forward and to think, you know, what can Georgia do? What can the Georgian government do? What can Georgian civil society do? And what are the prospects for Georgia fulfilling those conditions going forward? So that's the question that's in front of us today. And with no further ado, I shall introduce our three amazing speakers today. They are firstly Natalie Sabanadze. Natalie Sabanadze is one of the greatest diplomatic minds of her generation in Georgia. She spent over 8 years as the EU's, as Georgia's ambassador to the EU, or Georgia's head of mission, to be more accurate, to the EU, and also ambassador to Belgium and Luxembourg, if I'm not mistaken, for the same period. Natalie was at the heart of the action in terms of when Georgia was granted visa-free travel, for example, to the EU, the Schengen zone more accurately, and all of this sort of great leaps forward that Georgia has made in the last decade or so in terms of EU integration. So Natalie had a front row seat and was fully participating in that process. She's also a visiting professor at the moment at Holyoake College, having left the Foreign Service. And she also has a background having worked at the OSCE and the BBC in the past. So a truly illustrious academic and official record. So we're very, very proud to have her as one of our speakers today. We also have Vano Chkhikvadze, who is the EU Integration Programme Manager at the Open Society Georgia Foundation. He's been doing that job for 10 years now, if I'm not mistaken, which is, you know, again, like Natalie in a very similar way, from the NGO perspective, a front row seat in terms of watching and analysing Georgia's EU integration over the last 10 years. Vano has also worked at various UN agencies in the past, including the UNDP, and was educated at the College of Europe in Natalie, as well as other universities. Thirdly, I don't know if she's joined us yet, we have Mariam Laskhi, who's the Deputy Chair of the Foreign Relations Committee of the Georgian Parliament. She was elected to Parliament 2020 and is one of Georgia's rising parliamentary stars. She used to work at many different locations over the last decade, including the World Bank, and she was an associate professor at the Business and Technology University in Tbilisi. But what brings all three of our speakers together in common is that all three of them are dedicated pro-European advocates of Georgia's Euro-Atlantic integration. So I think hopefully it will be a very interesting discussion. Hopefully we'll have to hear very much from me from now on. I've introduced everyone, so I would like to ask Natalie, because I know you're here, if you would like to start. Each speaker, just to be clear about the rules, will have about 5 to 7 minutes speaking time. And then afterwards, there should be space for questions, answers, so forth. I'll hand it over to you, Natalie, if that's okay. Hello? Have we lost Natalie?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, yes.
Okay, good. Thanks a lot.
Can Georgia do it, is the question.
Yeah, okay, it's a good question. Of course, shortly, but thank you, first of all, for a very flattering introduction, and I try my best not to disappoint. So I will go through the questions that you have put forward in a kind of a short description of this panel to keep it focused and concise. But let's begin, first of all, what do you really recommend it? What do they want from us? There is a text, there are these 12 points that everybody refers to, the letter of the recommendations, and then there is, of course, subtext and the spirit of the recommendations, right? And both are very important. So basically what it said, the Commission concluded that Georgia is implementing association agreement and DCFTA. It is doing it fairly well. It has clearly administrative capacity to move from the basket of associated countries to those of candidate countries. It has an economic potential, and there's been underlined then on the economic field that Georgia has been doing quite well when it comes to the fulfillment of the requirements of the DCFTA. However, it also said that as regards political criteria, the Commission still needs to be convinced. Georgia basically has to demonstrate that in addition to her administrative capacity, it also has a capacity to hold a political dialogue internally and a political will to conduct necessary reforms. And this is what we need to show, basically. And I think this is a fair assessment of the situation in a kind of unwritten hierarchy of criteria, if you want to. Political comes to the top. The new EU basically needs to be sure that it is giving a promise to a country that can do politics the European way. Now, there is a large definition, and there are different variations of what it means to do politics in European way. But one thing is clear, and I won't go into different versions, but one thing is clear, it is not what Georgia does right now. So this is where we need to work on. Now, the government and the ruling party would, of course, blame the opposition for this. And I think that will have a point to a certain degree. It does take two to tango. When there is a requirement to cooperate, to create an inclusive process, if the other side refuses constantly, it's not going to be very helpful. However, we should also look into the existing environment that we operate in and ask the ruling party the right preconditions for this dialogue have been put in place. There can be no doubt that primary responsibility for conducting reforms lies with the government, right? They're the ones sitting in the offices. They're the ones who in charge of policy. So they should be able to do it, willing to do it. But we can also say that the primary responsibility for creating the right preconditions for inclusive process and for the political dialogue also lies with those who have power, and that would be the ruling party. So at the moment, what we see are the wrong kind of preconditions. I will talk to this representative of civil society, but not that one because I don't like them. I will only engage with one opposition party, but not the other because the others are radical, and so on. So this kind of, this is not for the government to decide who is radical, who's not, who's the right partner here or not. This is the spectrum that we have. So you have to work with what we have and try to reach out and give assurances that there will be a process conducted in good faith. The discourse that accompanies our political life from both sides is certainly not reassuring. And it is not something that gives anybody an impression that you can have a civilized conversation around such an important topic, which is Georgia's European future. So instead, basically what we see coming from the ruling party is blaming others for the failure. It's everybody else's fault. It's fault of the opposition. It's fault of the EU ambassador in Georgia. I don't know anybody else but them. And another thing is, and that is relatively new, we see also this kind of juxtaposition of the EU versus peace and fairness. And that is a highly Eurosceptical kind of approach. So justifying yourself, you say, well, you know, the road to the EU lies through the war. This is the price you may have to pay. Now, there have been denials about this, but the substance of arguments that we have heard is that. And, you know, this is a very high cost, and nobody will be willing to pay this, but this is a wrong question. And Georgia and the Georgian dream does not hold copyright for this kind of talking points. I mean, Hungary does that, Orban does it, Serbia does it. I don't know, they must have the same source of inspiration. But this is not very helpful. So it's not helpful because it means two things, and I will try to be quick. It means two things. First of all, you're outsourcing responsibility. And secondly, you do not admit that there is something that needs to be done. I mean, this whole argument about unfairness of the decision, which we've heard, is also basically saying that there is nothing wrong with Georgia, and it is very difficult to start fixing problems unless you see the problem in the first place. So the attitude in that sense needs changing. So for me, the primary obstacle is there. It's the discourse, it's the attitude, it's the position that the government has taken right now. And I talk about the government because they are in the driving seat, and others should follow. Now, what can be done about this? And I think this is the role of the opposition and civil society comes to the fore. I think there needs to be a serious pressure on the ruling party, the kind of pressure to which they would respond. Now, what we see in Georgia is kind of consolidation of a regime that in the literature, and I have my professor hat right now, that in the literature is characterized as competitive authoritarianism. It is competitive, like, you know, you see that in every basically conclusion of ODIHR after elections, right? The elections were competitive, but they were not fair. So you have increasingly authoritarian structure, which maintains facade of democracy and democratic processes. It derives its legitimacy from democratic processes, but in substance, it consolidates power in one source and is very, very wary of any power sharing whatsoever. So this is what we have in Georgia. And it is difficult to ask the kind of government that has built this kind of system to undergo all the requirements that are put forward by the EU, because these requirements, if fulfilled, will destroy the system. So it's understandable there is a kind of resistance coming from the authorities. At the same time, I know that there are a lot of really dedicated pro-Europeans, particularly among civil servants, also including in the Georgian dream. So I cannot believe that there is no resource in the country to actually put the process of dialogue in place. It is possible. It just seems incredibly difficult. And of course, opposition can be more constructive. Opposition also can be a bit more clever. And I don't want to put all of them together. But basically, if you put all of them together, everybody's responsibility is to demonstrate that they are different, that they act differently, that they talk differently, that they don't play from the outdated playbook of the 90s and 2000s, talking only about revolutions, that there is substance there, and that convince population that they can deliver on reforms and they can deliver on European integration, which is very important for the population and for the Georgian citizens, do better than what the government does. And they're not being very convincing about this. I think civil society is active in Georgia, very engaged, and that should continue. And pressure from civil society, their ideas, their recommendations, whether they're shared, accepted or not, doesn't matter. They need to be there. We need a kind of overarching, large scale, consolidation of people across the political divisions in Georgia around this idea of European integration. I have to applaud Vano, who will be talking after me, because the kind of work he does with the quality that he does is very important. And even though he has been on the receiving end of fire for critical remarks, this kind of criticism has to continue because it is very, very important. Otherwise, we will not hear differences at all. And finally, there is the international community, and that you have not mentioned in your brief, but international community also has a huge leverage and a huge potential to pressure Georgia through different means, including diplomatic means. And that needs to be used also cleverly, perhaps with a better conditionality. If I can be slightly critical of the EU here, the conditionality that is general, that is abstract, like depolitization, which paradoxically ended up being like the biggest source of politicization, or the oligarchization that, again, paradoxically, in our situation, may end up being used as a vehicle to pressure the opposition. These kind of conditionalities are too abstract. They need to be more concrete and more measurable. And that's something that EU also can do, and they have a huge experience in this. But I remain optimistic. Of course, I believe that Georgia can do it. I'm sure it will do it at some point. But true to its history, its recent political history, I think the road will be neither short nor very simple. But hopefully, in the process, we will grow into European democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalie. That was a very interesting overview of the situation, a very interesting perspective. You mentioned, people within the Georgian Dream, many of whom are very patriotically pro-European, and we're very lucky today to have one of those, one of the strongest voices within GD in foreign affairs and pro-European orientation of Georgia with us today, the Deputy Chair of the Georgian Parliament's Foreign Relations Committee, Mariam Laskhi. So I guess, Ms. Mariam, the question is, Natalie sort of brought up the kind of tension between Georgia's very strong successes in terms of the technical aspects of EU integration over the last 10 years under Georgian Dream, but also this sort of slightly problematic rhetoric that have been coming from some quarters within the government. So I suppose the question is, Mariam, whether what you would say to that, and where you think things can go forward, and how we can make sure that we get that candidate status at the end of the period stated by the EU.
Thank you, Alexander. First of all, thank you very much for organizing this event and series of online meetings. I guess this is very important to gather together, talk about the challenges, about the progress, and see what are the best ways to further move this and accelerate this process. I want to also thank Ms. Natalia, who has been ambassador for 8 years, and who, as she has mentioned, will be driving these issues in order to further harmonize and come closer and closer to the European family, make sure that Georgia is coming closer. So what I wanted to first of all highlight from the Georgian side, wanted to give a smaller update from the parliamentary side, as well as comment on some of the points. So first of all, want to highlight that Georgia really values the historical decision of European Council, which was on 23rd of June, on granting Georgia the European perspective as an acknowledgement of the progress which Ms. Natalia was also highlighting, which Georgia has achieved in its democratic transition throughout 3 decades, actually, after regaining the independence and the price which Georgia has paid in its fight for freedom and European choice. starting from the several waves of cleansing the Abkhazia, Twin Valley regions in 1990s, or Russia's military aggression later on in 2008. At the same time, of course, it's really regrettable that the differentiated and considerably tougher approach was applied towards our country by not granting the candidate status to Georgia alongside with Moldova and Ukraine. We believe it's in the best interest of all three countries, as well as the European Union, to take the firm strategic stance towards the unity and EU membership of all three countries. The government of Georgia has reaffirmed not only once its commitments and actually started the implementation of all the 12 priorities determined in the European Council's decision. Right afterwards, on 1st of July, the ruling party, Georgian Dream, unveiled a plan to meet 12 recommendations. The Parliament of Georgia launched the process of implementing the recommendations without delay. The Speaker of the Parliament initiated the process by meeting the parliamentary opposition parties without highlighting who is radical, who is not, or not choosing who is the friendly or not. He invited and encouraged everyone to participate, and also the name itself, radical, which Ms. Natalie was highlighting, comes not out of the blue, but it comes with the actions which they are taking on. And when the opposition parties were invited, Georgian National Platform, also the civil society was invited with the platform of Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum and facilitated the joint dialogue. The process is organized in three directions. One is the parliamentary working groups, the committees, as well as the plenary. A working group is a parliamentary instrument, those who do not know, which is defined by the rules of procedures of the parliament and allows every MPs, and not only the MPs, but also the state institutions, as well as civil society representatives, to come together in this working group. 9 parliamentary working groups have been created since 11th of July to work on particular parts of the recommendations, to screen the state of play in each area and propose respective initiatives for the parliament to be adopted through the committee or the plenary. The Speaker of the Parliament leads the whole process, so it's on the higher level of this process, and all 9 parliamentary political parties are invited to participate in this process to implement jointly the recommendations. Unfortunately, 5 out of 8 parliamentary fractions or groups, which is Georgian Dream, Citizens, Girchi, European Socialists, and For Georgia, are engaged in deliberations of the working groups, but other 3, those who are highlighted as the radicals, the United National Movement, Lelo, and Strategy Ahmashenebeli, refused to participate. So this was again another demonstration of their radicalism to really fulfill the recommendations. Civil society organizations, also through the Georgian National Platform, as I mentioned, of the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum, relevant state institutions and experts also participate in the process. The involvement of these mentioned actors is of very important, very utmost important for us, as the expertise makes an invaluable contribution to Georgian European integration. They bring their practices, and we see lots of the tangible recommendations in this discussion. So as planned, we have already introduced relevant draft laws so that Georgian courts proactively consider ECHR judgments in their deliberations. We have also offered an inclusive procedure for the selection of candidates for new public defender, and this was also a part of the voting, which I was a few minutes participating. We have also initiated the constitutional draft amendments on the procedure for electing the prosecutor general with higher threshold of MPs. Other significant legislative packages on electoral code, judiciary, anti-corruption, gender equality, and fight against violence against women, also improving the parliamentary oversight capabilities, and further strengthening state institutions are in pipeline. And we already have in each of that directions already meetings with the stakeholders. We again urge all the stakeholders, particularly those who decided to boycott and delegitimate this process, to engage with higher responsibility. Georgia is doing its best to implement the recommendation with the time frame announced by the European Union. Moreover, further democratic consolidations, strengthening the. Hello, can you hear my voice? Yeah. So, moreover, the democratic consolidation, strengthening the rule of law and good governance, as well as protection of human rights, remain the top priorities as invisible parts of the new association agenda for 2021-2027 that the ambitious nature of European Union and Georgia's relationship and address all the key issues on our agenda, including the majority of the mentioned in 12 priorities. We hope and we also expect that the candidate status to be granted to Georgia, considering the concrete steps we have been taking to fulfill the assigned priorities. And we hope that our friends and partners in the EU will continue to be engaged actively in the process and take further decisions on merit-based approach with full reflection of the political momentum. So at the end, I want to also highlight that Georgia remains a reliable partner of the European Union, an important foothold of democracy in this geopolitical turbulent region. So we see our future in the EU, and we are committed to continue the difficult but rewarding path of reforms. So thank you very much, and I'm at your disposal for further comments or reactions.
Thank you very much, Mariam. That was a really interesting overview of the procedural and legislative agenda that the government is putting forward in terms of fulfilling the candidate status conditionality, and you gave an interesting overview of your perspective on the parliamentary working group process with the opposition. Our next speaker is Vano Chkhikvadze, who from OSGF, and Vano obviously wrote a very interesting, somewhat controversial article before the candidate status decision was made, in which he and Sonia Schiffers from Heinrich Böll Foundation argued that something along the lines of what actually happened as a potential candidate status would be the right way forward, rather than granting Georgia candidate status straight away. And that was a rather controversial take at the time, but obviously that's exactly what came to pass. So it's very interesting to have you here, Vano. I would pass the baton on to you and ask you what your view is in terms of the next few months and the prospects of Georgia actually managing to fulfill those conditions.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex, and for inviting me. Also, thanks to CSS for organizing this very timely event. And I will start, of course, trying to answer that question, which has as a title of our event, "Can Georgia do it?" And I think that we all agree here in the country that Georgia has no luxury not to do it or not to ignore it, or to ignore it. So we can do it, but the question is when Georgia can do it, because this is a timeline that matters, considering all this window of opportunity which was open largely thanks to the Ukrainians. And this window of opportunity does not really would not stay open for quite a long time. I think that this is a historical decision which was referred here, the decision of the European Council about the extent enlargement, because this was something which these three countries actually, sometimes led by Georgia, was asking for. And you already answered that it's ready to have the eastward enlargement in a midterm or long-term future. And we also saw that EU gave the candidate status to Ukraine and Moldova, while giving just the potential candidate status and European perspective to Georgia, which actually is a success at one hand, but at the same time, it leaves the taste of the savior, because Georgia could have been together with Moldova and Ukraine having the candidate status now. That decision, looking, very deeply and thoroughly, we can find out that this is it actually introduces some split in the trio format, which Georgia has been advocating for, Georgia has actually to catch up as soon as possible those two countries which are running ahead. Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova, of course. And there are actually two ways, or at least two things that needs to be done. First, as it was already discussed and mentioned, Georgia has to speed up and to fulfill the 12 criteria, 12 recommendations, if you will. And the second is Georgia has to patch its ties and its relations with Ukraine, because if you look at the Eastern Partnership, Ukraine is something which is very much driving the process there. But fulfilling those 12 recommendations is not an easy job, actually. It's pretty difficult because of several reasons. Firstly, because it is of a very general nature, those recommendations. Secondly, it's not clear what is the criteria. It's very blurred, actually, the criteria that European Union would apply once it would assess the implementation of those 12 recommendations. There's also, and there was some uncertainty when it comes to the deadline of fulfilling those recommendations. And last but not least, it's about the political will that the ruling party has when it comes to the implementation of those 12 recommendations deeply and thoroughly. Unfortunately, we have seen that in the last couple of years, the authorities have been losing the trust among the Western partners, and this is also which is hampering the process of pushing forward Georgia's EU integration. We have seen that Georgian Dream decided to withdraw from the so-called Sharm-el-Sheikh agreement. We have seen that Georgian Dream decided to go against the recommendations of our Western partners and appointed the judges at the Supreme Court. That actually happened this time last year, and that cost Georgia losing the macro-financial assistance of 75 million euros. We also saw that the organizers of the attack on the critical media, which took place in July last year, are not punished, and they are not brought to the justice. Whereas there are the question marks still ongoing investigation about the kidnapping of Afghan Mukhtarli, and as well as surveillance of some of the diplomatic corps here in the country. So, as it stands now, and let's be frank, those recommendations, or most of them actually, are not new for us. Those recommendations were regularly and very often echoed by our Western partners, and unfortunately, it was falling on the deaf ear of the ruling party. Whether this kind of the carrot of the candidate status will be sufficient enough to carry out the thorough reforms, we have to see, and we will see it soon. But if we look at the recent survey of the Caucasus Research Center, we can find out that 45% of the population does not believe the Georgian Dream would fulfill those 12 recommendations. That means that Georgian Dream has to introduce a proper check and balance system. That means that Georgian Dream has to address one of the huge problems in the country, which is about the state capture. That means that there needs a parliamentary oversight, especially on the law enforcement structures. That means somehow repairing the problem of human rights violations in the country, independence of judiciary, etc., etc. And one of the first things that also needs to be done is that Georgian Dream has actually to openly condemn that anti-Western statements, which are sometimes said and made by the representatives of the Georgian Dream, and they have to actually address that issue. And I'm just going to my intervention here. We have to acknowledge that EU integration is not a sprint; it's actually a marathon, and we have to look at it through that lens. It's not just about the getting candidate status; it's a very longer story than that. just getting the candidate status. That means that the proper structure has to be established, in which we'll be dealing particularly on the integration related issues. And also we have to be very careful about two things, about the timeline, because next year everything needs to be fulfilled. Otherwise, we might see that in 2024 you might be more inward looking. I mean here that there will be the new European Commission taking the office, there will be the European parliamentary elections. So we don't really know how would be then what would be the foreign policy priority of the European Union. And last but not least, again, Georgia does not have a luxury to be to be late when it comes to the trio format, or to be kind of, to demolish that trio format, because we see that if we look back to the history, we see that EU is always, when it comes to the enlargement, always applies the regional approach. And when we look around in our region, I mean the region of the South Caucasus, we don't see that any country, Armenia, Azerbaijan, are keen to go to the EU membership path. So we have actually should be together with Moldova and Ukraine, and we should not kind of miss that train which has already departed. Thank you so much, and I will be happy to participate in the Q&A session. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Vano. That was a very illuminating set of points you put forward. A lot to think about, especially around the nature of the EU's the EU's conditionality, and how Georgia has so many challenges still in front of it to be able to fulfill them. I think now we have a bit of time now for questions and answers. So if there's anyone listening who wishes to ask a question of one of our speakers, please raise your hand. Mariam has raised her hand, I think. Did you want to say something quickly before we go on to next stage? You're muted. Sorry, could you unmute?
Sorry. So maybe this will be a quick question to the previous speaker. First of all, thank you very much for the overview. Just one point I wanted to double check. So when talking about the catching up with Ukraine and Moldova, I just want to reassure and tell to the audience as well that with the majority of the questionnaire and criteria, including the European Union SEPs and others assessments, Georgia has been in all of these sub indicators always been ahead of Moldova and Ukraine. And also another point I wanted to say, Moldova still is a part of CIS, which is again very rhetorical, or maybe something ununderstandable for me when assessing these three countries and putting on the same plate. And another point, today Moldova announced that they will be resuming the flights to Russia. So the actions, the indicators, looking at that and then saying, catching up with these three countries, wanted to double check with Mr. Vano, was it mentioned by the certain criteria, or just catching up with being the having the same status?
Thank you very much, Mariam, for that question. I mean, I would like to be able to give people in the audience a chance to ask questions very soon, but I think that was a very important question. It's one that's really come up a lot. Vano, you yourself said that the criteria that you put forward were sort of quite general and quite vague, and quite difficult to sort of even tell whether Georgia has fulfilled them or not. And when you look at, as Mariam points out, the other countries in the process, and in terms of the technical integration with the EU are key, Georgia is actually still the leader, in that sense. So I guess the question that I think Mariam is asking, and I think a lot of people ask, are the EU's criteria and position vis-a-vis Georgia fair?
Well, I just want to clarify that I meant the current status, because it is now, as we know, Moldova and Ukraine are ahead than us, one step ahead. That's what I meant when I was saying that we have to catch up. When it comes to the fairness of the EU decision, well, I think that this is very much about we have to also think that this is not just only the technical criteria. This is very much about the political criteria of the political part of the Copenhagen criteria. You know, when it comes to the political part of the Copenhagen criteria, and I was saying this in my intervention, unfortunately, we have been witnessing that Georgia has been dragging behind or going behind. So that was one of the crucial points when he decided not to give the candidate status to Georgia back in June. So I think that this is not just about the harmonization of this legislation, which is important. I don't question that one, but it's much more important, or equally important, if you will, to fulfill and the political criteria, which is about the judiciary, which is about the human rights. So this is something which needs to be addressed. And also the trust.
Thank you very much for the
trust to the legality. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sorry. Thank you very much for that short and direct response. I was asked Natalie whether you have anything to add in terms of that question. Is the EU stance fair given Georgia's historical leadership role within even those three countries?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to answer it in my brief presentation, sort of maybe perhaps not so directly, but I said that of all the kind of criteria that is out there, right? And in the Copenhagen, you have technical, you have economic and political. Political criteria is decisive. Mariam referred to the reports included by SEPS. These have been written 2 years ago. And even there, Georgia actually on political criteria, on the levels of democratization, was actually behind Ukraine and in some instances Moldova. Even then, now in Moldova since then, there's been a huge leap forward. A new government came into place, a pro-European government, which we have to admit has a lot of sympathy today in Brussels. We used to have a lot of sympathy too, and it was kind of and now what is happening is the reversal of the positions. And there is one thing, but I think it's not very helpful to be doing, why them, why not us, because it goes contrary to what Vano was saying about the importance of this trio. And a degree of solidarity within trio also needs to be established. But returning to the political criteria and fairness, there is one feature that characterizes both Moldova and Ukraine, and this is a very important feature, and that is a consistently change of power through democratic elections. That has happened both in Ukraine and Moldova repeatedly. And in the case of Moldova, Maia Sandu came to power, defeating a pro-Russian president. A regime that also by European Union was considered oligarchic. It's a poor country, and yet the elections produced change. And that is something that is still questionable in Georgia because we've had that only once. And the way elections are being conducted, they are competitive. Perception is that it is unfair. There is a question mark whether the change can be produced via electoral road, and this is I think a very big deal also for the EU.
Thank you much, Natalie. So I think at this stage I would like to open up the meeting for members of the audience who want to ask any questions of the panel. So if you could put your hand up if you're interested in asking a question, and I can. Is there anyone? There was someone I think just now who had their hand up. I don't see them anymore.
Alex, there is a question that's been posted in the chat. If you
in the chat, is there?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'll read it out. I can see it. Yeah. EU latest discussion from Cüneyt Gürer. I don't know if I said that right. EU-related discussions oftentimes at the elite level, at the political bureaucratic policy and economic level. How do you evaluate the reaction of the public to the EU's approach, and what should be done to prevent EU fatigue, which might open room for more non-EU perspectives? Turkey's experience shows that once people get tired of technical discussions and rejection, populist leaders gain support. And this is, an interesting question. What's the impact of this on public opinion, and what could the long-term implications of that be? Who wants to start by answering that? The three of you.
I might try. I give it. I think that we do see that if we look at the opinion poll again, we do see that the support is going down because in less than 5 months, basically, the support to the EU integration in Georgia dropped by 7%. It was very high, of course, it's always high here, but it was 75 in March this year, and recently, when CRC measured it, it stands now at 68%. I think that two things needs to be done. First is that civil society, in parallel of keeping the accountability of the government, has to work to engage with the various social groups to explain why is it important for Georgia to keep on the EU track. That's one thing. And second thing is that the ruling party has actually to review its statement when it comes to the EU integration, and when it comes to the statements like bringing or opening the second flag from Georgia, dragging Georgia into the war, etc., etc. So I think that these are two important things in order to ensure that example of Turkey is not something which is repeated here in the country.
Thank you very much, Vano. Would Mariam or Natalie like to respond to that?
I can add maybe just a couple points. It is true, this is a correct observation, and it's relevant not only in Turkey but also in the Western Balkans that have been sort of in the waiting room for a very long time. There is kind of accumulated frustration that the process takes long. So on the EU side, I think now that this decision related to Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova have been really triggered by this kind of geopolitical earthquake that is taking place in the world, and especially in the region, that they keep this geopolitical pressure on mind and also move faster, respond faster, engage faster with the candidate countries and those who are waiting, because it is undermining the kind of appeal of the European Union if there is no progress. However, they cannot at the same time compromise on the requirements. This is also going to be against the grain of the EU. They cannot compromise on values, and they cannot on the basic criteria that needs to be fulfilled. So then here it's the responsibility of those who are in charge to do this fast. And I totally agree with Vano, timing is important. We have no luxury to stay out of the trio, because if we do it, given our, the difficulties geopolitical that we face, it's going to be very difficult to catch up, as it was discussed, and be in the same boat with the trio. But also, I see a direct link with the dropping of the popularity, or the 7% drop that Vano referred to. I do see a direct link with the kind of Eurosceptical discourse that is now coming from the Georgian dream and its hierarchy. It has been repeatedly said the decision was unfair, we deserve it, but we didn't get it, and it is linked to the war. The relations with Ukraine are really bad. So this has been a change. We've never had that before. Always at the government level, also at the opposition level, but particularly from from governments, successive governments in Georgia, they had very, very strongly pro-European and pro-Western political messaging. And this is changing now, and I think it has an impact.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Mariam, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, quick adding. I can agree on both of the comments. So when the frustration in the population comes with, on the one hand, the unfairness, and on the one hand, that the costs, which was mentioned. So the cost which Georgia has taken was the war several times, the cost we have taken with the reforms, and then when comparing to other countries, definitely the frustration would come in the population. I agree also that on the one hand, the government and also the ruling party has to be more active in promoting the EU values and promoting in the messaging and also the benefits Georgia will be getting. On the one hand, this has to be jointly with the civil society and all the key people with whom the population are listening to. So from everyone, this has to be kind of joint messages coming that what does the European family mean, and reiterating it. On the other side, it also is some of the negative things are also coming because of this personal attacks, definitely from each of the parliaments, both from Georgian parliament as well as from the European Parliament, to each members, to like personal things, not to the not looking at the like a bigger thing, and not looking at the country and the union. So I think that in this messaging and also sharing the values, demonstrating what are the key benefits of being the member of the family has to be in this direction. And hopefully the survey, which next time, I know how when it comes, but the surveys statistics will be increasing.
Thank you very much, Mariam. Medea has her hand up. So if you want to ask your question, you can unmute yourself first, please. Otherwise we won't be able to hear.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, sorry, there was some technical issue. Thanks a lot to all the speakers. It was indeed very interesting discussion. Thanks to EDSN for bringing this discussion. There are so many things I want to say when it comes to European integration and the recent political developments, but I'll try to be very short. Well, first of all, I think that, when we are talking about awareness raising of the Georgian population about the benefits of the European integration, I think more awareness raising is needed is needed for the Georgian government and for the Georgian parliament, so that they know what European integration is and what the benefits of the European integration is, frankly speaking, because I am convinced as a citizen of Georgia that Georgian population is very well aware. But we see that, in fact, the political will of the Georgian government is not there, which means that basically Georgian government is not responding to the will of the Georgian people. This talks about awareness raising is a little bit, irritating, and it's like really belittling the Georgian population, who is very much, pro-European, in support of European integration, and knows quite a lot about the benefits of the European integration. My question would probably go more to Miss Natalie and Mr. Vano, because I have a very critical question, and Miss Mariam will, well, if she wants to respond, of course, but because my question is very, very critical, the thing is, there is an increased sentiment in Georgia, I think, among different circles, among different people, that actually Georgian government is not interested in the European integration. It's not interested, not only because it will lose power when it will implement democratic reforms, but because of its economic interest in Russian Federation. And many are convinced in Georgia that Georgian government has vested economic interest in that is attached with the Russian Federation. So economic interest with the Russian Federation rather than Europe, for instance. And this plays a role also when it comes to its policy towards European Union. So my question is, like, would you agree to this? And would you say that actually Georgian government is not interested in the European Union, in the integration with the European Union, and that is because economic links with the Russian Federation? Thank you.
Thank you, Medea. There's also another question which is kind of similar in the chat, and I think it's a similar kind of level. I think it's fair to say that there's a section of the Georgian population who share a similar outlook, a similar sort of suspicion that the Georgian government is not sufficiently interested in European integration. I'm sure Mariam would disagree with that, but it's probably a question that needs to be dealt with during this meeting at some point. I suppose the most clear manifestation of that, probably the reason why Medea is asking this question, and a lot of people say this is some of the statements that have come out of, particularly Chkhikvadze, but maybe a couple of others, certain sections of the ruling party, not the whole ruling party, which have been perceived as being sort of rather abrasive towards the Western partners. So I think all three of our speakers should have the opportunity to answer this question because it's a quite important one. Obviously, for Vano and Natalie, it's a straight yes or no question. Mariam's answer will be no, but it will be interesting to know what Mariam's perspective is in terms of, like, especially this kind of rhetoric and where that fits in to the Georgian strategy for European integration. So whichever one of you wants to answer first, you can volunteer.
I can start because I will be short, maybe. So definitely, I cannot agree more that the perceptions are different from the factual part, right? So on the one hand, I will be disagreeing because you have to look at the facts and the statistics and real execution, and this is way more valuable than the perceptions or the sentence statements, which I mentioned earlier as well, is more like a personal attacks from personal people, and it's not about looking at the whole union or whole country, right? So one is that Georgia has and is demonstrating this will by the facts, by the daily work. And I'm pretty new in the politics, and I'm coming and I see lots of the faces, familiar faces with whom I have worked earlier as well in my previous capacity. So I was far from the politics, and actually being in the politics and being part of this process, I would never be personally in other way, like if something was going in other side. So mine and you will name the names from the parliament as well, who daily basis are working on coming closer and closer to European Union and demonstrating the pro-Western will. And this is not only the statements, but this is with the real work, real daily work, and executing all the parts. When we're talking about technical things, I would disagree to Ms. Natalia's point that on the technicalities, like the capacity, administrative capacity is going forward, but the political will is not. Because without each other's assembled work, this will not be executed and this will not be going forward. So what also can I add? So I understand that the perceptions, and this is maybe something which we are lacking as a ruling party, to manage the perceptions and to see the go through these sources of these perceptions, but also on the economic ties with Russia. I would also here say that when talking about the sanctions, we saw by the facts and statistics that even with more European Union member countries, we have sanctioned Russia way more than some of other European countries from the practicalities. And when talking about some room that we are, some of the tracks or anything is going through Georgia or avoiding the sanctions, of course, these statements were not true, and this was proved by the real facts. So this statement, Georgian population is really emotional, and especially sentimental in the topics which is on the one hand about independence and on the other side our pro-Western values. And this type of untrue and false statements are definitely working on the perception. So this is my comment from this side, and I'll be happy to add more on that.
Thank you, Mariam. You talk about perceptions, and I sort of quickly add sort of a little mini question of my own. Obviously, we were talking about these sort of quite abrasive statements by some people. Do we think that now we're getting into the technical stage of actually implementing the policies needed to fulfill the criteria? Do we think some of these statements may stop happening? Do we think that in order to improve perceptions, we might have a change of tone amongst certain figures in the top of the government? Can we suppose yes or no? Do we think that's going to? I think that's a yes. Yeah, but that's very good to hear. So now I think Vano and Natalie should respond to the original question, which is Georgian Dream sufficiently interested in EU integration?
Yeah, I can go.
Natalie.
I think the question and the spirit in which the question was posed is perfectly fair. I mean, perceptions obviously are not generated from the thin air. What we witness, and we've been talking about statements, it is unprecedented to Georgia to have so much and such a consistent verbal attack on European and Western partners. Mariam mentioned these are personal attacks, but when you criticize in a very harsh terms that I would say attack ambassador is not a personality. There is a country that stands behind him or her, and in some cases, in case of Karl Hartzell, European Union, it cannot be personal. When it comes to MEPs, I don't think anybody's attacking Viola von Krammen for, I don't know, her cooking skills. It is what she's representing, right? So it is not personal. We're talking about politics. We're talking about people who are interested in Georgia. Honestly speaking, there are 700 around members of the European Parliament. How many of those are really interested in Georgia? It's a small bunch. And if you go around making enemies among them, and they will be critical, and I have been there when they have been very critical, but it has never been the policy to push back in such a rude way. The policy has been to kind of explain, to have them on their side, etc. There is a change in the attitude. There is a change in discourse, and it seems like there is some kind of instruction. There are some instructions going on to push back as hard as possible. And we can trace really the beginning, and that's where the perceptions are coming from this kind of cancellation of Charles Michel's agreement. Georgia government did not have to do it. irrespective what UNM did. They did not have to do it. Charles Michel could have been the biggest friend of Georgia right now, chairing the European Council. We could have gained a considerable diplomatic and political benefit from sticking to this agreement and actually doing what's written there. It was not done. And then there's been the whole series of events that show that things that matter to the European Union are not taken seriously by the Georgian government, and what is done is being exactly the opposite. Now, we can have a whole list of laws that are in the pipeline, etc., etc. But yes, the laws are being pushed through, but they're done fast, they're done without consultation, and very often they go contrary to the opinion of the international experts, Venice Commission, ODIHR, etc., etc. We've had that, and this is the problem. So it creates, all in all, a kind of overall impression that on the one hand, there is rhetoric, and the government keeps saying we want the EU, but everything they do demonstrates the opposite. Now, about very briefly economic interests, I cannot judge because I don't have evidence, and I think it would not be responsible of me to make claims like this. There is some kind of vested economic interest of the whole government. I don't think so. But one thing is clear, I don't know, but one thing is clear is we have invested a lot in improving trade ties with Russia. We have signed the CFTA, but there has not been a huge effort in making sure that Georgian companies actually benefit and Georgian economy benefits from this huge opportunity, which is opening of the European market. However, there's been a lot of emphasis on restoring trade ties and other kind of ties with Russia. And the result is that Russia now has restored its leverage over Georgia, which it had lost. And that is, I mean, on the one hand, it's understandable. You want to improve economic situation, yeah, but on the other hand, it comes with a political cost, and the political cost is increased Russian leverage, and that's a fact. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Natalie. So, Vano, what would you add to that?
Yeah, well, I would fully agree with Natalie that actually, when it comes to the personal attacks, this is not the personal attacks. This is the attacks on the country. And we actually heard the very clear statement by Ned Price back in July when there was an attack on the ambassador Degnan, that this is not an attack on the ambassador. This is an attack on the country which posted the ambassador here in Georgia. So this is something which needs to be taken into consideration when we are making such kind of statements. Also, when it comes to the dependence on Russia, we see that year by year, Georgia's dependence on Russia has been increasing. Just one figure, if you look at the export of Georgian products to the Russian market back in 2012, it was 47 million, whereas in 2021, it reached to the 610 million. So it's a huge increase, whereas the potential of the CFTA, which has been here for quite a while, already 8 years, was actually not fully utilized, and it needs to be invested a lot in order to do that and to shift fully to the EU market, or as much as possible. Certainly, we saw the decision of the Georgian Dream, which was actually overturned in 24 hours. Because initially the Georgian Dream was not actually going to apply for EU membership, and we saw how this decision was changed in 24 hours time, and that's very interesting to hear what was the kind of triggering moment for that. But huge and biggest kind of challenge, which would not allow any government in this country to derail from the EU track, is popular support, and we saw the reaction of the population back in June, when it was about the Georgia's EU candidate, when Georgia did not actually get the candidate country. So I think that it would be very difficult for any government to go against this will of the people, which is pretty high in the country. And I hope that this will be there. And that's one of the crucial tasks for the civil society, to keep this support as much as possible.
Thank you very much, Vano. So there's another question from Marina. Marina, would you like to put your question to the speakers? You could unmute yourself first. We still can't hear you. I can't hear you anyway. Mariam, make sure your microphone is working. If we can't get it working, then you can type in the question into the chat, and we can pose it that way. Yeah, we can't hear you. So if you could type a question into the chat, then we can hear it that way. Yeah, I think while we're waiting for Mary to type the question, I can ask a quick question now about the follow-ups about that economic question. So both Natalie and Vano talked about the DCFTA not being fully utilized and trade with Russia increasing. How much of that is because of political will? And how much of that is because it's just easier to trade with Russia because it's next door? I mean, for example, if you're growing apples in Gori, you just have to get a Kamaz and fill it up with apples and drive it across the border. Whereas if you're trying to trade with the EU, the DCFTA is obviously a big opportunity, but it's also not it's not a customs union. So, you know, it's pure Georgian products like wine, obviously you can export. But if there's something like, if it's more complicated, then there's a whole rules of origin comes in. You have to export it over the Black Sea. It's a much more difficult process to export to you. I mean, I suppose what I'm asking, are there objective reasons other than political will for why DCFTA has not really had the economic impact that it should have done? Or is it actually just a lack of policy competency or political will?
I will jump in briefly. I think, of course, there is. There is no doubt the biggest problem in Georgia's, one of the big problems in fulfilling DCFTA or taking advantage is the physical distance. That's probably why Moldovan or Ukrainian records are much better when it comes to trade with the European Union. It's also the facility, as you said, it's much easier. There are no requirements, etc., etc. It's the market that is relatively well known. Now, undoubtedly, there are objective reasons why it logically can go in that direction. But knowing that this market is Russian market, I mean, comes with political strings, that dependence on Russian market is extremely dangerous from the national security point of view. That's where you need to policy to balance the convenience. And you have the DCFTA as an opportunity to use in order to balance it. So what needed to be done is to ensure that the natural drift of Georgian economy towards Russia would not go this far. It actually had to be stopped purposefully. But instead, what we saw is it was encouraged. And this is the reality that we have.
Thank you, Natalie. Vano or Mariam, would you like to follow up on that?
Very briefly, again, I think that this is not just only the political will. This is, just the distance, of course, matters. But at the same time, there's also the political will. I don't want to go into the technicalities, but as far as I know, as there are the studies, there was a huge problem of laboratories to testing the products for the EU market here. So I think that was something which needs to be addressed and where it needs to be invested as much as possible in order to not this problem not to hamper the Georgian producers to export to the EU market. So, and I cannot agree more with Natalie that actually we know how volatile it is to be dependent on the Russian market. We can close it at any moment when it decides. Actually, we know it from our own experience.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. We all remember several times in history where the Russian market is completely closed at pretty much zero notice. You know, we don't need to have lessons on how Russia behaves in these circumstances. But I just want to ask: does Mariam quickly want to answer that? If she's still with us? I know she's in Parliament at the moment, so it's possible there may be another meeting or a vote that she's had to go to. I think Mariam's gone for now. So, okay, in that case, we can move on to the question which, you're here, Mariam is here. Sorry, the question was about the DCFTA and Russia. And it was actually my question because I was filling in for the time until one of the other questioners could fill in to type out their question, which is about, is how much of the failure of Georgia to really fulfill the potential of DCFTA is due to just physical distance and difficulty of trade with Europe compared to Russia in many ways, things like European legislation on quality of products and so forth, and how much is it just to a lack of political and policy competency in terms of encouraging more Georgian trade with Europe, and maybe those policies haven't been strong enough, and equally policies discourage trade with Russia. And I think Vano and Natalie both were have gave balanced accounts, but basically said that there was a policy problem. So I was interested to hear what your perspective is in terms of what the Georgian government is doing in terms of encouraging better utilization of DCFTA and maybe less dependence on Russia economically. I know you're typing. You're unable to speak to us now directly. Okay, maybe we should let. Okay, I don't think Mariam can actually talk to us, so I'm going to read out the chat. Mariam says the key in DCFTA is diversifying markets, especially decreasing trade with Russia. I think we all agree with that. If you think you can talk to us directly, Mariam, in like 5 minutes, we can come back to you so you can answer the question. It might be easier than typing it all up. And if you can hear me, Mariam. Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll come back to you. We'll move on to the next question, and then if you can add your remarks about the DCFTA. That was my question anyway, to be honest. So to the next question answer, that would be great. So I will read out the next question. Marine Chitashvili asks the following. I'm sorry, I can't really need to make sure I can read the chat properly. Sorry, screen froze up. I have one comment and one question. Comment: the chair of the parliament today said he won't comment on four former GD members' letters, as they were valuable members of the party. Is this not perception? This is fact. And two, the question: how do you think the opposition can be consulted from the civil society sector just to run rational politics? I don't know if so, I mean, there's this, obviously these four supposed defectors from GD who wrote that sort of have taken a kind of much more Eurosceptic kind of position, sort of spreading, I think, what can be fairly said as a conspiracy theory about the European Union wanting Georgia to sort of start a war with Russia. This is not, I'm not officially coming from the Georgian government. These are from people who have officially defected, but nevertheless are quite close to figures within the Georgian dream still. So I guess I suppose it's up to Vano and Natalie to answer what their perception is of this question.
Well, I think that this four gentlemen who are there, nobody really believes that they're acting on their own, and nobody really believes that they don't have any clear-cut instruction from the Georgian dream. I think that would be naive. You cannot really find any single person who is interested in Georgian politics who would say that these people are just, acting on their own, frankly speaking. And I don't think that anybody believes in it. It's some kind of quasi-project of Georgian dream, and we just have to wait and see how when this project would end up, because it's doomed to be failed, actually, and it's failing as it is now. I just want to echo what was written here about the figures about the DCFTA dependence, and I just want to share very, very detailed information with you. Until 2021, the share of the Russian market in the Georgian wine export increased by 55%. So now we are more than 50% dependent on the Russian market when it comes to the wine export. Georgian export gradually increased from 47 million USD, which was that time in 2012, 2% of the total export, to 610 million USD, which is 15% of the total now. So Georgian gas dependence on Russian gas, Georgian dependence on Russian gas actually increased from 2.8% in 2018 to 23% in 2021. And I'm just not mentioning here the tourism, etc., and remittances, how much dependence is there on Georgia and how much this is increasing. So this is something which is vulnerable, and this is something which might have an effect in a short-term or medium-term future on Georgia as its state production. So this is something that needs to be verified.
Thank you, Vano. So, Natalie, do you have anything to add on that, or the question around the defectors? Obviously, I mean, I don't think I must agree with Vano. I don't think I've met anyone who seriously believes that the four defectors don't have links still with figures within Georgian Dream. But the question is, I guess, for me and for a lot of other people, what is the point of this whole escapade? What does it really achieve? Making people believe that there's a sort of war possibility and that the West is behind it, which is clearly not true. Who does that benefit? Because it doesn't really clearly benefit the government either, really. It's very unclear why this is happening. So I was wondering if you could help give your perspective on that, Natalie.
Look, I do think it benefits the government, and this is, as I said in my introduction, this kind of linkage between, the EU, the West wants war. This is not only Georgian dreams, right? It happens in many other countries of similar type of regimes, and as I said, they must be getting the talking points from the same source. It's a popular conspiracy theory also in many parts of Eastern Europe. But where it is beneficial is when you want to cover up failures domestically. And in Georgia, which is incredibly pro-European population, whether 7% is up or down, doesn't matter. The population is very pro-European. Georgia historically sees its political destiny to lie with the European Union. And you have such an opportunity, which all of a sudden opened up, and Georgia is lagging behind. It's a great progress, no doubt, compared to 3 months ago, but it is still lagging behind. So how do you explain it? It is a very clever move, to be honest, to say, well, wait a second, do we really want it? Because the road to the EU lies through the war. The cost is war. And the country that has suffered through the war, this resonates quite terribly. And I do think that some of the loss of the support is linked to this. So it is a very useful, propaganda tool. And I don't think it should be underestimated. It is not coming from the four defectors, obviously, because, I mean, we have not forgotten that before they defected, the entire ruling hierarchy was pretty much saying the same thing in slightly more kind of in more toned down version, but they were saying the same thing. And these guys now have just gone direct, in case somebody didn't understand. But it's a continuation of the same choice of rhetoric, undoubtedly. Just a little point also coming from the head of the government, and Vano mentioned numbers. When head of the Georgian government, PM Garibashvili, was explaining why we will not be really supporting Ukraine in this war quite so openly, and there will be no joining of sanctions and so on, he listed in great detail how Georgia is dependent on Russia. He listed it, and it was very fascinating to listen, actually. There was so much trade, there is this, there are remittances, etc., and what a great impact on the welfare of the Georgian population this would have. And that was extremely problematic for me to hear, actually, to see how much, going back to the point of leverage, how much the leverage of Russia has increased. So it all adds up, I think, and makes sense in many ways. Now, Marina also mentioned, engaging opposition and how society and opposition can somehow push for more rational politics, as she says. I think it is very important, but opposition also continues to play by the same old rules. It's all about street protest. It's all about, we demand the early elections one day, then we don't demand them. But where is substance? I mean, there should be a debate on substance coming from the opposition and saying that I have policy options that will put Georgia in a better place. And again, I'm using this as one. There is a lot of differences within oppositions, and some do it and others don't. But this kind of return to or revival of rational argumentation is absolutely essential for the country.
Thank you very much, Natalie. So I think we're coming towards the end of the time that we planned. We said we'd do this for an hour and a half. But if there are any other quick questions, if people have a little bit more time, I'm happy to entertain them quickly before the end. Does anyone else have any other questions? Quickly, if not, then I will begin to wrap it up. Okay, it sounds like there aren't. So I guess thank you very much to all three of our speakers. I've had a chat from Mariam, who says she's at a hearing of the State Security Service, so that's why she had to sort of partially leave the meeting. But thank you to all three of our wonderful speakers. There were some very interesting comments made by all three of you. And I think if we can get hope in any way from this discussion. Some of the stuff we've been discussing is quite depressing, in terms of, are we really going to make it or not? And sometimes it's been a bit downbeat. But the thing we can really take out of this discussion is very optimistic, is the caliber of what we've been talking about today. We have someone here aligned with the government side. We have people, from non-government side, and we all are able to have a very constructive and interesting discussion on the merits of Georgia's candidate status and how we get there. And I think if there's any hope for Georgia, it's for us. I think right at the beginning, Natalie, you said the EU is interested to see if we can do politics in the European way. And I think this discussion here has been a great example of that we have done politics here in this small online forum in a very European way, in a very respectful way, with all different opinions sort of put forward, but everyone staying respectful and discussing things in a sort of in a positive, constructive way. So there is hope in Georgia, and this discussion has been part of that hope, I think. But there's still, as Vano said, a long and difficult path ahead. So thank you for all three of you for your great contributions. And this is the first of a series of events that we'll be having. The next one will be on decolonization of Russia, which is a very controversial topic, on the 30th of September. I can't yet confirm who the speakers will be for that, but if any of you are interested in that, please watch this space, and we will keep you informed of when and how that's going to happen. There's actually, interestingly, that one of the ideas for a future event that we had was to do one on the dependency on Russia and the economic aspects of that. So that would be another potential event that we're considering in the future. So watch this space for lots of interesting new events over the coming months. Thank you all very much for coming, and hope to see you again. Bye-bye, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
And yes, you can watch this again on YouTube. The link will be sent round.